So I want to make a video talking about the relationship divide between trans masculine people and specifically their mothers. I compiled some information and data from both the infamous article Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria by Littman and Blossoming Child Mourning Parent by, correct me if I'm wrong, Polin Sans Fashion et al. I know I didn't pronounce that right. I'm going to start with the rapid onset gender dysphoria, go through some of these, and just kind of lay a base for what I'm going to talk about. I noticed a lot of trans masculine people, whether it be trans men and non-binary people who were born female with parents who disapprove of it, or they have developed a less strong relationship with their mother post coming out as transgender. And I think I have a pretty good idea of what kind of goes on in the parent's head that causes them to feel such strong emotions towards their child coming out as transgender. So in Rapid Onset of Gender Dysphoria, if you haven't seen it here, I'm going to kind of summarize it. So it was a study of parental reports. So this is all just basically reported things that parents have said about their transgender children. 82.8% of these reported being assigned female at birth and between the ages of 11 to 27 years old. The parents had reported that their teen children had no prior signs of gender disaligned before puberty, as if it were contagious. They reported outbreaks occurring within their friend groups. They claim it's statistically unlikely based on past data, which, according to past data, less people were reported as transgender because there was no information about being transgender, there was no word to describe what it was, so, They reported that their children did not meet criteria of early onset gender dysphoria, meaning that they showed signs of being transgender as, like, maybe a toddler, and so on. They have a lot of their information based on a clinic, one in Canada and one in the Netherlands in 2012, talking about adolescent onset gender dysphoria. And no data is provided. It's very, very weakly sourced, like hardly scientific, if not at all. But they cited this source saying that adolescent onset gender dysphoria, those adolescents were significantly prone to psychopathy. No data is provided here. It's just a claim, like right out the box. It suggests that adolescents who claim to be transgender must be screened for schizophrenia, mania, psychotic depression. The list goes on. They mention peer contagion, which was the mutual influence of behaviors promoting harm to self or others within friend groups. And they claim that the recent visibility in media is a double-edged sword, which encourages vulnerable individuals to believe in non-specific symptoms to be dysphoria. And by this, they're referring to people they call their daughters as being weak and very easy to influence by, media coverage of, like, transgender, and basically they don't believe their children that they're transgender. They use, in this article, examples of Reddit posts, like no research, Reddit posts to say, like, oh, these are the people who are trying to tell your children that they need to transition, and they're convincing them. Absolutely ridiculous. And so 91% of these survey filers were maternal parents, and that's what I want to get into with the next article. They claim that it came out of the blue, and 76% declared that the child is wrong about their dysphoria, that they're not actually experiencing it, and clearly it's something else, or they're just doing it because it's, like, trendy, and so on. Now let me get into this one, which I actually quite like. It's got a lot of good information in it, which is scientifically backed. It uses data and clear resources. It's by Polin something et al. I don't know how to pronounce that. Okay, so it's blossoming child, mourning parent. So they did interviews of parents and the child for this one. The trans children experienced difficulties not intrinsically related to their trans identity, but rather to the negative social context, discrimination, and violence placed against them. They reported that the trans mental well-being was equally mentally well and stable compared to their cis peers when, one, they received parental support, and two, they had the ability to live as their authentic gender. The parents reported experiencing senses of grief and loss in things such as denial, disbelief, anger, because what I believe is a lot of these maternal parents, they see their transmasculine child, while they may have previously projected an idea onto this kid, like, this is my daughter, maybe she's gonna take after me, she's gonna do all these certain things that follow kind of a patriarchal stereotype of what a woman should be. The idea is kind of completely shattered once a kid actually comes out as transgender. And although nothing changes with the child, like say they were already socially transitioned, had short hair, dressed like a boy, and then suddenly the kid's like, hey mom, I'm a boy. It kind of shatters this whole perception the mother had of this kid, where she was still able to place a image onto this kid of, you know what, maybe this kid can be girly in this way and that way, and maybe she can take after me this way or that way. But then the straw that breaks the camel's back when a kid comes out as transgender makes the parent realize, okay, this kid isn't going to, take after me as a woman, and then they have to deal with coping with what comes next after realizing that. Well, the trans kids experienced relief of coming out. The parents then after experienced mourning and concern for the child. The parents had reported assuming their child to be either gay or noticing no signs at all, in denial, or just hope that they didn't want it to be true. And the youth in cases did not express their identity prior to unknowingness of what they felt. For an example, like growing up but still doing things that were plenty feminine, girly, just liking it, but then feeling like something was not quite right, or almost sometimes wishing like you could live a different life or just wake up as somebody else, because there was nothing you could relate it to and describe as like, oh, that's what I'm feeling. Like, I had never heard of trans people before until like maybe 2018, 2019, so as like a child, like I had no idea what that was, and so I didn't have a tendency to express these kinds of like early signs. In these cases where the parents felt their kids didn't present any like prior signs, it led the parents to have a delay basically in understanding the kid's identity and so on. So the youth had reported relief of coming out, and they tend to want medical transition pretty quickly after coming out, because it's like once you finally get that off your chest, it's what's available to you, and obviously you're gonna want it. But then the parents stress the changes because it's all new to them. So they feel the sudden transition and concern of child's possible regret, having the failure to recognize how long the youth had experienced dysphoria. Overall, this leads to the parents' grievance of that image they created for their child. And I believe this happens in maternal parents with their transmasculine kids, because they have a great image in their head of like, I'm gonna have a daughter and she's gonna do girly things and she's gonna be my little mini me, and when they finally realize like that's not gonna happen, it shatters their perception of their relationship with that kid, and it almost needs to be rebuilt, and sometimes unfortunately it isn't.